We are recording too. Everybody should be aware.
Okay, tell me when.
Start now. We're good.
Okay, well, hello everyone. Good morning, good evening. I know we have a lot of people from around the globe, so we are all very happy to have you join our talk. And my name is Okeanis E. Vaou. I am an assistant professor of neurology at Tufts School of Medicine and BU School of Medicine, and I am director of movement disorders at St. Elizabeth's Medical Center. We have three wonderful speakers today. I'm going to start with introducing Kate Donovan. She's a PhD, MBA, MS, and she's a clinical director of innovation for the Department of Pediatrics and director of the Simulator Program in Innovation Digital Health Accelerator at Boston Children's Hospital here in Boston, and a co-founder of Hacking Pediatrics. We also have Varun Manny. He is a vice president of advanced research. He's gone through hackathons, and he's seen his ideas being developed and incubated, and he's at the Euphoria Augmented Reality at PTC. And last but not least, is Vangelis Limboridis. He is a PhD part-time professor of VR AR at University of South California at Bitterby School of Engineering, and the founder of Enosis VR. So I would like to open it up to questions to our speakers, our panelists. We will have Q&A questions. Feel free to write any questions in the box, and we will be addressing them at the end of our discussions. I would like to open it up to Vangelis so that he tells us a few things about what is medVR, Vangelis.
That's great. Thank you very much for the warm introduction. Hello, everyone. We exclude the other technologies of AR and mixed reality in the continuum of immersive technologies, is that the virtual reality technologies are more known. So keep in mind that when we refer to medVR, we're talking about the whole continuum of the immersive tech, commonly served as XR along this community. So we are an international group of medical professionals, academics, developers, creatives, and innovators with passion about healthcare and medical innovation using immersive technologies. And we came together because we identified this lack of support for a vibrant community that is invested in the same way that we are invested in the field, thinking about what we can achieve in years to come using these powerful technologies in the healthcare and medical spaces. So we came together to facilitate the growth, the development, the growth of this community, and organize. We started with a gross vision of organizing a big symposium and hackathon in medXR in Boston, and we identified the opportunity to, before we go to the hackathon, to actually facilitate the educational part of this endeavor, and we envision to deliver an educational program that we're going to talk a lot today about it and how it's structured and what we'll actually have in mind. But we want to bring together, again, people from our community, academics and medical innovators, industry leaders, for a series of lectures, workshops, master classes, along with a mentorship program, a community building program, and team building program, to ease the development and create strong foundation for the ideas that the community will bring forward to develop at the hackathon and support the innovation in XR. So there are a lot of benefits for those that either they have a small team or they have strong interest in getting into the space. There's a tremendous potential for learning, for building associations with mentors, for developing groups and exploring ideas, validating the ideas through these professionals. The more you are getting involved, the more you're going to harvest the benefits from what we're planning to put together.
Thank you. That's very rich. And I think my next question would go to Varun. Varun, why did you join medVR, and why would anyone join medVR? Can you give us some personal stories about the value of someone joining?
Sure, and it's great to see everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you guys. So, actually, I thought it might be helpful to share some of the pictures actually from my experience over the last 4 years. And let me just get this sharing. So I had actually joined a hackathon, and quite frankly, like, hackathons have literally changed my life. In the last 4 years, it's changed my entire career trajectory because of this one decision I made back in October 2016, which sounds kind of superfluous, but it's not. So in October 2016, there was a hackathon called Reality Virtually. It was an XR hackathon. And I had kind of dabbled in augmented reality a little bit beforehand because of my work before, but I just thought it would be interesting to kind of spend a weekend meeting new people and just trying to code something. And so this was the hackathon. This was an actual picture from the hackathon, and I ended up meeting a group of really, really cool people. And I think that's kind of the number one thing I'd like to kind of impart on everyone here is, yes, there's the educational part of it. Yes, there's the awesome kind of skills that you'll build. There's the huge amount of value you're going to actually create in the industry. But for me, I think the biggest thing was the people and the community that I actually got to interact with when I was there. So it was a 3 or 4 day hackathon, similar to the one that the medVR one is going to be like, and we ended up kind of building up a project. And what was really cool is our team actually ended up winning that hackathon back then in October, and it was kind of a 48 or 36-hour kind of coding dash, and you can see me here with like very little sleep, and that's what you're going to go through as well if you're excited to join this. But after winning, that was essentially just the start of the entire journey from my perspective. So more than the project itself, or more than the money we won or whatever, I really, really liked this group of people that I met there, and I literally never met any one of them before this weekend. It's the first time I got to meet with them, and more importantly, it was really nice working with them. We kind of played off of each other. The ideas were very good, and we had very different skill sets. So we just thought, like, hey, let's see how far this goes, and we decided to kind of keep in touch. We actually joined another hackathon right after that with the same team, and so this was at the AT&T Developer Summit, which was interesting because it was actually organized by similar people between the two hackathons. And so here you can see kind of we had met kind of a initial group of people at the first hackathon that then grew to this much larger community with AT&T was one of the sponsors of the original hackathon. And not to mention the fact that we all got closer as a group as well, because we ended up sticking with the same team. In January 2017, when we decided that we'd join this other hackathon and we ended up winning that, we thought, like, hey, there might be actually something here, and we decided to kind of start a company. And this is what happens to a lot of hackathon teams out there. Depending on the space that you're in, depending on the hackathon that you're in, people try to kind of go off into a startup, or they end up going into academia, or they end up getting just introduced to a whole new industry. So in my case, my experience was we ended up creating a startup, and we just went kind of insane because we were so excited about the technology. We were so excited about the applications. We ended up going to warehouses to see how they might be actually be able to use some of this stuff. We went to research labs. We went to biotechnology labs. We went to the MIT power plant to talk to them. And this was just a kind of information gathering phase, right? And we would kind of talk to as many people as we could to learn as many of the problems out there in the world that we could actually apply some of these ideas onto. So we ended up spending three to 4 months on this, and then in the summer of 2017, we officially became a company, and we actually joined a couple of accelerators in the Boston and Massachusetts area. And this was kind of the third kind of big phase, right? So we'd kind of done the hackathons, we'd grown our community there, and with their support and their help, so a lot of those people are still very involved in our lives today. And we ended up starting this company. And over that summer, we actually tried to get customers. We built out a product. We actually built an MVP for this as well. It was an enterprise augmented reality suite. And then finally, we got in touch with this company called PTC, again, through the same community. So I happened to be hosting a panel at Harvard Business School, and I think I'd actually talked to Steve, who's one of the organizers of medVR, and he had actually introduced me to some other people. And in that panel, we actually ended up meeting PTC, this company. And PTC is this large industrial company, and they were super interested in the work that we were doing, which was completely unrelated to the panel. But that community then came back in, and the picture you see on the top right is the day that PTC actually announced that they were going to acquire our company. So within the span of 2 years, we'd gone from kind of hackathon to a fully functioning startup to getting acquired by this company called PTC. And now we're actually at PTC. We've shipped our product that we had actually originally incubated back at the hackathon. This is our team of people here that we've hired at PTC. And some of the folks here, like, these are incredible people in the industry, right? So we've got visual artists who worked on The Matrix, who worked on Game of Thrones. That's this guy over here in the middle here. We've got folks from MIT, we've got folks from Dartmouth, and we've started to really grow our community now. And then the best kind of full circle here is this January I went back to the hackathon, the same hackathon, and I was a judge instead of a hackathon member, because there's rules where you can't rejoin the same hackathon if you've won it previously. And so now I give back to the community now by talking to people and help increase this community, right? So medVR is just the next kind of path on this, with a whole new set of people, with a whole new industry, and I'm really excited to kind of to be part of this. So that's the short version.
Well, thank you. That's very exciting. Kate, what do you think? What is your personal story in this journey of medVR?
Yes. First of all, I have to say I love your story. I love listening to that, because seeing, the end result of a hackathon is so exciting when the success has happened to that level. So that's really, it's very inspiring to listen to your story for sure. I have kind of two stories. The first is I started using VR at Boston Children's about 10 years ago with a simple build out to expose patients and families to environments prior to their arrival. Kind of a low fidelity Google Street View, if you will. It was available with a ton of information pop-ups, and people could explore, the bus stops, how much it costs to park, where the local food places were, etc., around the Boston Longwood area. And after that experience, I explored using VR in the clinical environment for pain management and distraction, which led to, so anyone's in this space, multiple grant submissions to get money to actually purchase things, and great collaborations with companies such as Applied VR and Kind VR, which is pediatric specific. And I realized very quickly that the power of VR and its use cases were and still are endless in the healthcare space. For me, this is a natural extension. I've been part of hackathons for a very long time, doing all sorts of build outs and things like that. And my interest in programming and gaming and healthcare just made sense that I would kind of shepherd this into Boston Children's. And as you mentioned, I'm a co-founder of Hacking Pediatrics. And with that, I'm also asked a lot to mentor and judge for medical verticals and hackathons through MIT, Harvard, institutions like Children's LA, Cedars-Sinai, companies like AT&T and Facebook. One hackathon was actually that hackathon, which is the Reality Virtual Hackathon. So I actually may have played a role in you winning that hackathon. I'm just saying. I'm not taking credit, I swear to God. So for the Reality Virtual Hackathon held at MIT's Media Lab, I met the fantastic Stephen Max Patterson, who is one of the primary organizers of that. This hackathon wasn't specifically focused on healthcare, but had healthcare verticals. And after the last hackathon, we connected, we got together for coffee. We talked about the idea and possibilities for a healthcare specific VR hackathon. I invited him to attend the virtual medicine conference held at Cedars-Sinai with my colleague, Brennan Spiegel. And when we left that conference, we were 100% inspired to move forward with a healthcare specific hackathon. And I think, why am I involved? That kind of speaks for itself. But at this point, it's about creating and being part of this community, really building a foundation and connecting with people so you can get your ideas to reality, so you can connect with folks to see what some of the pain points are using this type of technologies, understanding what the use cases are, but also what the limitations are. And I think doing deep dives into this with folks in this community just makes sense. When, as a clinician using this at the bedside with patients, you really do start to understand some of the limitations, but also see huge benefits from this. working with folks that have huge programming skills, you can see potential of getting your ideas to reality. So I think from my perspective, it really is creating this community and offering programs like this, and definitely the hackathon, because the takeaway from any hackathon is really you leave there with great connections, whether that's with companies or just people and colleagues from around the country and even around the world.
Yeah, that's definitely very exciting. Vangelis, why can you give us your insight on why healthcare and XR? What is there that we can add to healthcare with XR, AR, VR? What's your take on it?
Absolutely. So as I say to my students, the right way to approach the immersive technologies is not actually as technologies, but as new mediums, as a new computing platform. So the idea of a medium surpasses the idea of the technology. Is what is a catalyst for social innovation? What is a catalyst for innovation at every industry vertical? And one of the early adopters of virtual reality and other immersive technologies from the past, from the late 80s and 90s, was the medical field. These technologies allow a lot of interesting new therapeutics and diagnostics, but also services, as Kate mentioned before, how they started with a service and soon they moved into the interventional part of leveraging these technologies to improve patients' life and outcomes. So we see scientific evidence, and there's a lot of literature around the medical use of virtual reality and other immersive technologies. So there's the evidence, and then it's the existing communities of providers and patients that they see the potential and they embrace it. And as we see the evidence and the communities adopting these technologies and these mediums, we envision the development of a business ecosystem around it to support that. So what is critical here is to stimulate the development of these kind of new business opportunity, not only for big companies or for the startup community, but really have a growth that comes from the respective members of the principal ingredients that build good products around medical VR. So medical innovation in XR is at the crossroads of the medical sector, technology, and the creative industry because of the association with media, games, and rich, engaging interactions. So this is what I feel is our purpose, to stimulate the communities to come together, polish the edges, facilitate this interconnectivity between the communities and facilitate the exchange between the communities. Understand that language is a big barrier, and the more you talk as a developer with medical professionals and vice versa, medical professionals talking with creatives and engineers, that is what cross-pollinates people to come in the right mindset to collaborate and build something new that is efficacious, that has validity, has a scientific merit, but also can be utilized in a medical setting, in a healthcare setting. So I wouldn't call it a moonshot. It's right in front of us. It's just that we have to facilitate its growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely the case. And through medVR, do you see any what important or exciting or upcoming events do you see or do we have, and how can we facilitate this vision through medVR?
Again, I mentioned a little bit about the education track, the vision about delivering this educational component, and that will be, in essence, a series of events. So far, we have been producing a lot of inspiring presentations and lectures around medical applications in XR. And please, for those that are just joining for the first time, our medVR community, go to the website, register, and take a look at the previous presentations. They're very inspiring presentations of use cases in the surgical theater, the surgical setting, and other uses of medVR. In parallel, there are a lot of other communities that they're developing around the medVR, medXR ecosystem, conferences, and that we need to build bridges and kind of facilitate mobility between the communities to go and attend, to build relationships in local communities and local events. And we're ready to facilitate on that under an active community.
All right. Yeah, thank you. I'd like to address the next question to Varun. Now that we've kind of solidified and explained what we're doing in medVR and why we want healthcare to be involved in VR, I'd like to ask you, Varun, who do you think should join? Who should join medVR, and also why? And why is it important to have people involved from different disciplines and join medVR?
I mean, I think that's a super important question, right? Like to always ask, right? Like I think it's the why now, and the who. Those are the three like always like the important things to ask when you're talking about something like this. So I think the why now, it's very interesting. I always the analogy I love to use for AR and VR is it's kind of weird. It's a chemical analogy, and since this is a medical community, maybe it makes more sense. But it's kind of activation energies, right? If you think about a chemical reaction or that's happening, you have some sort of activation energy where you have to get over this energy hump before something happens, and tech adoption is very similar to that, right? So the activation energy for your phone to pick up your phone and use an app now has become so low that it's unlocked so many scenarios out there that makes it so useful. So it didn't quite make sense to have to like pull up a calculator on your phone or to check the weather on your phone until everyone had phones in their pockets, and that activation energy and the price to actually use those phones came down. AR and VR and XR in general still has an activation energy, right? We should call it out. It's not something that everyone is using right now on the streets. The devices are still kind of bulky. Actually, I have one right here. So like this, putting this on your head is not easy, right? And plugging it and charging it is not easy. They're not cheap yet, but it's going to get there. And so the interesting thing about why now and why in the medical field is that the medical field is actually ripe to get over that activation energy hump. It's one of those perfect kind of mixes of there's enough problems in the medical field that are actually very well matched with XR technologies, right? And some of these include just spatial understanding. That's kind of the biggest tool that XR puts in your tool chest, which is this idea that you can actually like see and visualize things spatially as opposed to on a 2D screen. And that problem comes up over and over and over again in the medical field. Any kind of imaging thing that you're thinking about is actually a spatial problem, right? And today what happens is we collapse that spatial problem down into a 2D screen, which means that doctors and medical professionals actually have to do that translation in their head multiple times a second. When we can remove all that cognitive overload from them for this. And that means that a medical professional is now going to be willing to wear something like this on their head, right? So it all has to kind of mix together and merge together. Kind of timing is everything. So the interesting thing about the medical field and XR is it's a very, very ripe kind of easy pickings, I would almost say, that it's kind of dumb for us not to do this, right? If you think about gaming, for example, gaming has a lot of kind of interesting aspects to VR and AR, but the activation energy hump is just too high. And we will get there, I'm sure. I guarantee we will get there. And which is why the type of AR games that you see today, like Pokemon Go is the biggest one, it's not actually AR if you think about it. It's not actually spatial. It's very, very barely spatial down there, but the medical field and kind of the industrial enterprise field, which is the one I'm in right now, is perfect for that. So that kind of answers the why and the why now question. And then the who question, it becomes very interesting because it's like, should we just get a whole bunch of doctors to go off and think about AR? Or should we just get a whole bunch of like tech people or app developers to go out and do AR? Or should we get a whole bunch of designers to go out and do AR? The key thing, and I think the thing that I found the most beneficial through my hackathon experience, was actually the diversity of opinions, right? And I'm an extremely kind of technical development background type person. Sarah, who was one of my co-founders on my team in the end, she is very, very, very much more on the user-oriented kind of design side of things. So she would actually keep me in check, and I would keep her in check, right? And it's that tension that actually gives you really, really cool outcomes. If I had a team of just 5 other developers, we would have probably come up with a really cool technical solution that had no application, right? And so that diversity of opinions is what actually gives you good outcomes in the end. And I think it's diversity in terms of functional diversity, diversity in terms of background diversity, socioeconomic diversity, just to bring in the right problems and the right solutions so you can connect there at the same time. So that's why it's extremely important to, in your teams, when you actually come up and if you're interested to join the hackathon, make sure you have dissenting opinions. Make sure you have people that don't think like you, because that's how you'll actually get the best outcomes in the end, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. Kate, what do you think from the clinical aspect? Like, who should join and why, and what do you envision?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly have to just concur with what you just said in regards to having the diversity of teams. The other piece I'll add to that is don't be afraid to include patients and families with this. You know, coming definitely from a pediatric lens, so when I say patients, I actually have kids join these teams. And even if you don't think it pertains to someone's background, they are so quick to pick out things that will work and what won't work because their lens is so different. So you really do want to create this incredibly diverse team so people can look at the solution and you can understand the problems a little bit better. This whole collaborative approach, I mean, this is the thing I love so much about this, you know, medVR in general. There are a lot of resources available, but to have a space where you can interact with experts in the clinical space, as well as investors, programmers, startups, creatives, patients, etc. The approach we are trying to take is incredibly collaborative. And you know, as you mentioned in the past, that, you know, we connect with other organizations and conferences. So we have some of the best folks at the table. So ultimately, the agenda for us is truly to try and enhance the medical VR community and build a foundation for those who are even just curious about the space. And I always like to say it's free of charge because that's amazing to me. But the piece that I really push with this is healthcare. We're building this ultimately for patients, even if it's education for staff and clinicians and nurses. They are using this education to care for patients. And if we peel that back a little bit more, we're all patients. So we're technically building this all for you. How's that?
And it's way better than free of cost. I mean, I've made a career out of this now thanks to a hackathon. So it's don't undersell it by saying it's free of cost. It's actually extremely value creating.
Yes, 100%. Well, it costs you what, 36 hours of no sleep.
Yeah, I mean, who cares about that?
And look at the success.
And time is money. That's correct.
Exactly.
And then how do clinicians think, like myself, you know, a lot of clinicians are not very versed into technology and this kind of new upcoming technology. So how is it for them to join hackathons or medVR, and how do they mingle with the group? That's for Kate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So we typically do a call out. I will say that with my experience, we've been running Hacking Pediatrics about 8 years. We definitely curate a little bit more than we did. We have basically hacked our hackathon in the past. So just give you examples from what we did there. Our initial hackathon was a 3-day hackathon. We wanted clinicians and, you know, the whole gamut of folks to be at the table, and realized very quickly that clinicians don't always have the time to participate in a 3-day hackathon. So when we're looking at this, we have to be cognizant of their schedules and their availability. I think what's going to make this a little bit different, and I guess that's one thing to thank COVID for, is we've gotten very good at using Zoom and technology to connect with people. So, you know, putting that out there is an option for folks. But the call out and really identifying the fear that they may have to build out something and really give them this education, which we're trying to provide with a lot of these talks, to be able to identify places where they actually have ideas that can, you know, be built out, but can they connect with the right programmers? Can they connect with the right people that will support this to bring it to the next level? Do they have the right stakeholders at the table? A hackathon provides that initial prototype for them to actually bring back to the hospital, to talk to their colleagues, not just in the institutions that they work at, but outside the institutions, to see what worked for them and what hasn't. I think when you look at VR and immersive technology, it's a great use in the clinical space, because when you're in a headset, and I'm using VR just as an example, the noise is actually eliminated from this. So things like education, you can really educate someone in a very immersive environment where that external movement of a busy ICU is no longer there. We can say the same for using it with patients and families as well. I use it with parents as well. But I would say don't be afraid to jump into this space, because the support is there. Particularly if you have a diverse team, because you have people who all have roles, if you will. And I always say, identify your roles when you go in there. Everyone is an expert when you're sitting at the table, as far as hackathons are concerned, and everyone has ideas, and nothing's dismissive from that point of view. Nothing you can say really can change the focus on your ultimate build out, which is great. So I guess from my perspective, I would say definitely be part of it. The one thing I would love to see more of is nurses be involved. So nurses, child life specialists, technologists. I think that this is open for everyone in the clinical space, and don't be afraid to be part of this, because your ideas, or I should even step back and say some of your problems that you may have, we can work to come up with a solution using this amazing immersive technology.
Yeah,
So it's eliminating the fear, right? Yeah.
This is why, I asked specifically because I know clinicians have a big fear. And to add to the nurses part, I would also add physical therapists as well. Is very important.
Absolutely.
But Angelis, what do you think? What's your insight on who should join, who should be involved?
Everyone. It's like everyone with a passion that has expertise, and they're thinking themselves as the occupying central expertise that want to bring into the medical innovation and healthcare innovation using immersive technologies should join. Especially designers and creatives, a lot of times they feel that they're not developers, and they're not in the medical community. So, but they have a critical role into that. These are the ones that will make the translation and connect the dots between the experts in the medical community and the experts in the engineering community, because they bring their expertise from the creative and design standpoint. So the more diverse this community is, and includes, as we said, also patients and even general public and kids, the better it will be aligned with serving the goals here. What I would like to add is, like, one thing is to bring everyone together. The other thing is, like, how to facilitate this exchange. How do these different communities work together? We cannot just assume that by throwing people around a table, magically they start collaborating. And what I would like to stress out is, like, there are a lot of ways of to think about transdisciplinarity and interdisciplinarity and multi-transdisciplinarity. These are not just words, these have meaning. So from an interdisciplinary perspective, everyone is holding their discipline, and they're doing their part, and it's more like a serialized process for innovation. From a transdisciplinary point of view, there is a constant exchange. So the medical professionals take pieces of engineering, because engineers give them to them, and they understand more the limitations of engineering, and they able to start calibrating what they're saying and how they're saying it to a matching collaborator. And the same for the creatives or the engineers. So don't be afraid to ask questions about, I don't know, the medical setting, the science, the theory, dive into the mechanism of action, why that works. The more questions you ask, the more you learn from another discipline. And as this exchange is facilitated through a transdisciplinary environment, new innovations come that they're fortified from every perspective, rather than thinking in isolation and being like, oh, the medical professionals from our team will come with the idea, the designers will translate it, and the engineers will build it. Yeah, eventually that might be the case, but during the discovery, during the initial getting together, it's important to have this fusion, like a nuclear meltdown, where everything melts into creating a new amalgam of the principal components. So that will be my 2 cents on the how to do it.
Yeah, adding that curiosity, asking those curious questions definitely is huge with that. And just to step back for a second, even though we're in this space, we know this space, a lot of clinicians have no idea what VR actually does. And to explain it, you really can't explain it unless you use it. I mean, I can say all these terms and just immersive and it sounds really great, but unless you're in it and can experience it, I think that's part of the piece that for adoption and being part of this, we really have to expose folks to. And there are places available around different cities, whether it be libraries if they're open, a lot of VR clubs. You can go and test VR out, which is awesome. I wouldn't recommend the ones at the mall because it's a very different experience, but even connected with local institutions just to test it out. So you have an idea what the potential is of this. And so when you come in with a problem that you're trying to solve using virtual reality, it's not just, oh, I have a VR checkbox and we have VR at our hospital. It really is building out something that is thoughtfully built out versus a checkbox.
I agree. And I think the other, just to add to your comment, Kate, is that clinicians also, some of them think that VR is still part of gaming. So they don't associate it to other innovations, innovative ideas in healthcare.
Exactly.
Which is funny because it's the first time that we see gaming in VR in this wave of virtual reality. All the previous ones, that formed the foundation of virtual reality over the past 40, 50 years, a lot of them were about all other uses because we didn't have the bandwidth to develop games. So now it's just that it became more apparent to the public that these technologies exist. But from the academic standpoint, what we've seen is like a lot of groundwork into medical applications and healthcare applications.
Yeah. Varun, tell us also through your experience. And so what really happens after you complete the educational part and complete the hackathon? We have some questions from our viewers. How did you find all these connections to work on your project? So how do you do it after the hackathon?
I mean, this was just kind of my path through it. So everyone has a different path through it. But I mean, I think one of the key things, and just to put in a plug for this medVR kind of cycle again, is when I joined the hackathon, it was a 3-day hackathon. You literally you show up on the first day with nothing. Right, like you literally are a blank slate on the first day, and then there were some talks on the first day to get people kind of ramped up. I met my team on that first day, and then we decided on we formed a team based off of an idea that we came up with on the spot, and then at 11 p.m. that night we're like, oh, let's go to the media lab and then set up in a conference room and then talk about it. And at 11 o'clock we were like, this idea sucks. We're gonna throw it out and pick a new one. So one of the big differences, one of the things I wished we had beforehand was some time beforehand to actually get prepped on stuff, right? And I think that's one of the things I'm super happy to see with this medVR kind of cycle right now, where it's that educational aspect that Vangelis was talking about, right? So everyone starts with something that they can bring to the table. You start on the same kind of platform. I mean, however small it is, right? It's just some kind of thought space to think about, what am I interested in? What I want to kind of focus on? Which area do I think is the biggest problem? And just having the discipline to kind of think about that problem before jumping into some random thing in a hackathon is super valuable. So I think that's on that aspect. And then on the meeting people and the connection stuff, I hate networking. I hate talking to people. I find no energy in kind of standing in a giant conference and being like, oh, look at my stuff. Look how cool it is. I have slowly learned from my co-founders and the people on my team to do some of that, but it does not come naturally at all to me, right? So it is not something that I was born with this thing, and I don't think anyone is, frankly, right? So I think the best thing that I like to do is, and that I've learned this from Umar, actually, who's one of my co-founders, is whenever you meet someone, whether it's at a hackathon or at a panel like this, or like randomly on the street, or like at a class somewhere, that if you're taking a class, always try to think about how you can help them first. Never try to think about how they can help you. And then in like 98% of the time, at least in my experience, you will find sometime down the line, they will do the same back to you, and it's one big loop. And if they don't do it, it's fine. It's not such a big deal. So every single one of the people that were kind of instrumental in this path that I've led in the last 4 years has been just some random conversation where they asked me a question like, hey, do you know this API? And I'm like, yeah, here's how I can contribute. And then that person ends up becoming like the person that introduces you to someone else after that, right? So I think that's one aspect of it. And then the other aspect of it is, if you don't find energy, like I don't find energy in doing that, find people that do have that energy, right? Like always try to find people that compliment you on that. And then if you find that one person, it becomes a multiplier after that. So you don't have to do everything yourself.
Yeah.
I laugh at that because I'm the same. I hate networking. It's just tough. It's like.
So what do you think, Kate? What do you think about that? What happens after the hackathon?
Well, so I mean, tactically, the day of the hackathon, I mean, the day we finished that, we set up a website. We just went and was like, hey, what was our team name? It was Waypoint RX back then. And we looked if waypoint.com was available. It's a restaurant in Boston. So we're like, that's not available. Let's go with waypointlabs.com. And just that little kind of nudge was enough. And then we had met one of the judges that was actually judging us, came and met us after the fact. And he was like, hey, this stuff seems really, really cool. You guys should probably talk to Staples. You guys should probably talk to warehouses, because this kind of thing I've seen in my experience or in his experience as being very important. So we're like, oh, that sounds cool. And at that point, I was still in school, and Umar was also still in school. He was at the exec MBA program. So one of his classmates actually worked at Staples. So he just reached out to him and was like, hey, can we go visit? And in a lot of cases, it's just like going and visiting and just like being open to learning. So that like Staples visit was just completely random. And then some cases, it's just you going out and finding out ideas. So I was super excited about an application where the idea was to actually use an AR headset to capture a crime scene, completely not related to warehousing or industrial workers or anything, but it just was like stuck in my mind. It's like, this is such a cool application of this technology. It's so spatial. What if I could go to a crime scene, capture the entire thing, and then replay that crime scene? So I randomly just showed up at the Cambridge Police Department, and I was like, hey, can I speak to your police chief? I have a really cool prototype that I wanted to show him. And he took the thing. So I ended up pitching to the Cambridge Police Department and the Boston Police Department, to all the detectives there, right? So it's literally just like a little bit of being open to learning, a little bit of listening to connections, and then sometimes you're passionate about something, go for it. And obviously the police department thing didn't work out, but that's a whole other story.
I definitely think passion has to do with it to move things forward. So if you have a team that's really passionate about moving things forward, you're going to be successful. And some people think there's a stop there. And the reality is you can connect with lots of accelerators around the Boston area, really around the country and internationally, that you can pitch to be part of their accelerator, to build it and iterate, get it to the next level, get it into the hands of clinicians to test, to evaluate. As we mentioned, it really, for us, we've proven that there is some economic benefits to having VR in the healthcare space. So know that these are options around the country as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Vagelis, what do you think? How can you make a project after a hackathon? How can you move it forward?
I think everything got covered. What I would like to add is that there's also academic endeavors. So even if your prototype is too early to be directly deployed in a healthcare setting or another industry vertical, there is still room for research and clinical validation and utilization within academic structures. So if your project is not ready to be deployed, you are not ready for incubating it as a company following accelerators and other structures that exist for financing. Look at academia, see who is developing some similar things that maybe will benefit for that. Open sourcing. Open sourcing means that I'm enable others to take it and run with it. So there are many other ways of adding value to those that they're looking for that value if you're not the one that you would like to profit from.
One other thing is, I mean, I think I made it sound like, oh, if you're super passionate about something, you should kind of go for it. And that's absolutely true. At the same time, you should also not be super married to your idea, right? So if you go through the hackathon and you're like, oh, this was really cool, it worked out in the hackathon, that may not be a valuable business long term. And a great example is my own example, right? So the project that we did for the hackathon was for pharmacies, where we would actually help people pick the right pills to make sure that we actually reduce the error rates. And we were so excited about it, and people thought it was such a cool idea. But we went out and talked to pharmacists, and they were like, "This is not at all a problem. We just like press a button, and then the right number of pills come out. Like, you guys are solving a problem that doesn't exist." And that's when we're like, "Okay, that's not a real problem. Maybe that same problem exists in warehouses." So don't be sad. I was so sad, but like, don't be sad if your idea, like that exact version of your idea, and in most cases it's not going to be, because you've spent a few months thinking about it. There's people out there that have spent years thinking about that problem. So be open to changing paths after that, and you most likely will end up with something better.
Yeah, embrace that iteration process for sure.
Yeah.
It's very educational.
It has to be practical, right? And that's where clinicians usually come in to tell you what the need is, or come up with that need. And then I think that's what a big value from the clinical, from the healthcare aspect is. So we definitely need clinicians to join. And Kate, so someone's interested from any type of discipline, how do they get started if they're new to this?
To join medVR, go to the website, sign up, watch some of the amazing talks that are there. What I love about the talks that we have been putting up there is it's not just clinically focused. There's storytelling, which is so important when building this out. We'll have things on video. I mean, you look at this space and it's just open for so many disciplines, not just from a healthcare perspective, but from our creators' perspective. 360 video is huge. It's time consuming. It's something that we need folks to educate us. We have to tell the story in a way that is digestible, not only to the folks that are building it, but the end users. I mean, truly the end users are what we're building this on. So I would say, one, test out VR if you can, and two, definitely connect online with us. medvr.com. It is .com. IO. I lied. medVR.io. And sign up, watch some of the videos, and there are going to be things along the way that are just going to resonate with folks. So I would definitely suggest taking time to do that. Connect with us. Feel free to reach out and talk about things more. Maybe you don't have an idea, but you're just kind of exploring the space. Be curious is always my go-to line for sure. But this resource is there, and I definitely say, please be part of it. We would love to have you.
And I think, Vangelis, we had a conversation earlier about how to get involved in medVR and how to contribute. I think you had some things you wanted to share.
What I would like to share is like be an active participant in this community. Don't think of it, I'll take the back seat and I'll receive, education, or receive something that will drive my career or my understanding further. You are owners of valuable experience and knowledge in your domain of expertise, and you have to share with the community. So this is an open call for everyone from the creative industries, from the medical industries, from engineers and technologies of all kinds to jump into immersive tech in a medical and healthcare setting to contribute, to learn and exchange. So especially this last component of exchange and the openness to share and the care that you're going to bring by sharing your expertise, as Varun said before, you'll be recipients of that care. So we want to facilitate the growth of an active community, an international community that is there to support each other and drive innovation in a grassroots way. So this is an open call for everyone to join. And also, if you're from another part of the world, come from another country, reach out. We're looking for people to join from other countries and become the representatives of medVR there, facilitate the local communities. There's so much we can reach, but what we can do is facilitate this learning and bring together these thought leaders, experts, educators to kind of drive this community. But we need people to cultivate the ground more in local settings and stimulate other peers there to join the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And Varun, what is your insight? How do you get involved in medVR or in general in this new world, exciting new world?
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of Vangelis said, like the website is a great place to start. I was just looking through the Q&A also. Some people were asking some more kind of specific questions for certain types of skill sets. So there's the awesome kind of educational aspects that Vangelis had talked about, and that the medVR community itself is going to be pushing. But I think a couple of folks had asked about kind of certification programs or what are kind of the more tangible or tactical things that you can do to help in the industry as well. So there's a whole bunch of opportunities there. If you're looking purely for kind of certification programs from the development side or the technical side, a great place to start is Unity, right? So Unity as a platform makes it super easy to get started on any of the XR technologies. And the nice thing about it is that it is platform agnostic. So one of the big things in this industry is we don't know which platform is going to win yet. Is it going to be Apple's iOS thing? Is it going to be Android? Is it going to be some hybrid of that? Is it going to be Microsoft's HoloLens? If you kind of go with Unity, you can kind of try all of them at once, which is nice. So you don't have to be married to one of them. And then that's on the technical side. But if you're interested on the design side, there are a lot of kind of 6-week or 12-week programs that are offered online. I'm actually on the board of one of these, and if you're interested in that specific certification program, they have specific curriculums set up that that consider jobs. So for example, our team at PTC has been hiring like crazy because there's a dearth of AR talent out there, and we actually try to help set these curriculums out there for this is the exact set of skills we want. This is certification for it. Go get that certification and we'll hire you right after that. So we try to actually make sure we have our fingers in all of these different kind of hiring pipelines, so that people that are coming through can immediately work through there. And having a hackathon in your resume would be insanely good, right? Because then we know you're kind of a self-starter. We know you actually have the skill set there. So those are kind of more tactical things, but the website, making sure you join the community, being active. If you're global, making sure that you're actually creating the community in your own region as well is all super helpful.
How about the role of psychology or psychologists to the team? That was one of the questions.
It's one of the
Go ahead. Yeah, I don't know if I'd be
it's one of the principal components for many reasons. One is the interventions in terms of behavioral interventions or other exposure therapies and other therapies in the domain of psychology, and VR is tailored for this because it's a place that allows for, first of all, relief. You relieve yourself from the external environment that might cause you some kind of anxiety or fear or any other kind of negative response, and you get into a space where it's you in the media. So there is something there to be said just from the escapism side, and then it's all the interventional components. As VR takes over of your principal senses of vision and hearing, we can create in a really safe and caring environment some interventions that are in the domain of psychotherapy. So psychologists can contribute a lot, of course, in the domain of knowledge of expertise for the development of that. But also, it's as we take over your senses and you navigate into immersive spaces and all that, we need to go into a user-centered or patient-centered design thinking. And there's a lot of concern about how to do it best. And psychologists, knowing the limitations and the allowances of the human condition, they can guide any kind of team on how to create something that is mindful and build around the constraints that the individuals have. So it's a very critical and important role.
I would even add from the pediatric lens, I mean, for us, it's really age appropriateness of some of the experiences, and they're able to help us navigate through that process. I think it's really important to have that lens whenever you're using VR with children, frankly. So I agree.
Kate, I'd like to expand this to, one of the questions was, what are the obstacles of applying VR? What have you seen that the biggest challenge has been in your experience? And what do you think, what are the people that, what are the obstacles that will make people say, no, it's not for me, or I'm not interested?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we're in an interesting spot because it's pediatrics. So we kind of approach VR in two verticals, if you will. One is for clinician education and one is for patient use. The use case for that distraction, obviously, there's a ton of use cases from that side. And a lot of times people approach us specifically for that specific use case. And ultimately what has happened in our environment, that there's a lot of startups and companies that are coming to us. So we end up having multiple headsets, multiple experiences. Some headsets don't meet the infection control requirements for the hospital, and particularly now during COVID, that's something that is absolutely huge. Some of the headsets only have one experience that is specifically for, say, an 8 to 10-year-old, which eliminates, the rest of our population. So pricing is obviously a challenge too. A lot of these companies that are coming in are licensors, year licenses, and occasionally we'll get some money coming in from different organizations that want to donate, but we only have a year worth and we can't really expand off of that. So saying no, I think it's really hard to get into the doors of institutions, to be honest with you. This is where things like medVR actually is incredibly helpful, because you can connect to the people that can move things forward a little bit and test it out. And I think we talked about having evidence to back up the potential and possibilities associated with immersive technologies. To have that in your hand as you go to the stakeholders to ask to have some of these headsets and experiences in the hospital, I think is really important. But I think people say no because it's very niche and they're looking at one specific experience versus multiple experiences. So it's hard. I mean, we try to standardize our headsets at Children's just because we're putting it in the hands of child life specialists, and we don't want to have them to worry about which one has to be plugged into a computer, which one is not standalone, which one is standalone, which one, the infection control can be different for different headsets and whatnot. So I would love it if we had folks building out experiences that could be used on a bunch of headsets, but I think we're not quite there yet. But yeah, it's really getting the right stakeholders at the table. Funding right now is a little bit tough because of COVID, as well as everyone's realizing with healthcare currently, but the benefits are really huge. So it's really being able to pitch the benefits versus accepting no for an answer.
How do you think COVID-19 would positively affect XR in healthcare?
Yeah, positively for myself, the other side for us is clinician education. And we've been able to kind of run with this and build actual modules to educate our clinicians on how to prepare and interact with COVID patients. Being able to educate, we're an academic facility, so we do a lot of, we have a lot of rotations that come through here. So we offer a lot of education in the VR headset, exposing patients to our simulation areas, to different areas of the hospital, even the OR, some of the procedures that are done with 360, which we build in-house. A lot of the nursing education is built. Some of it is off-the-shelf solutions. Some of it is editor-based solutions that we are building specifically for some of our protocols that we're using for COVID. So I think from the education, it's been incredibly helpful to have this. We were somewhat on a pause with using this with patients just because of the infection control issues and concerns from that. But I would say from building clinical education, this is really skyrocketed for us, for sure.
Another thing on the COVID stuff. So when in about February, March, when things were pretty bad actually in Massachusetts, there was a huge community, actually maybe like 600 people at one point, which was mostly doctors in the area that were like trying to put out requests for PPE, personal protective equipment, just because we were running out in Massachusetts. The really cool thing is once we had people on the 3D printing side that had come up with some new designs. We had people from the medical field that were actually testing them out like rapidly, and all of this was happening remotely, right? So everyone was by themselves. And then when we had to actually put together a supply chain for these masks, the best way to teach them, which was what Kate was saying, was literally through AR. So we'd actually push out procedures on how to actually build these things, test them safely, and then run all the QA tests before we actually ship them out to doctors that needed them. And AR was perfect for that, right? So when we think about the healthcare industry, it's not just doctors. I mean, doctors are a pivotal part of that, but there's so many other aspects of this healthcare industry, especially with COVID-19, that are perfect for XR right now, especially given the remote situation that we're all in.
I also think getting in the hands of physicians and clinicians exposes them to VR. As I mentioned, one of the hardest things is having them realize the potential of it. Yep. So once they have that exposure, they actually see the benefits and what it can be done from the patient end as well. So depending on how you want to use this, I think that there's huge benefits. So not that I want to say yay COVID, but for this end, it's been very beneficial. I'm not gonna say yay COVID.
And definitely the technology has ways to go to be improved and perfect for the setting of the medical field. But at this point, limitations can also facilitate a stronger application of the technology. If something is like way too broad and can accommodate everything and all that, people can get lost in that orientation. But if you know the limitations and you study the limitations and you ask the question, given these limitations, what I can do, it can really kind of focus, certain things that can work right now and solve problems. So limitations can also be beneficial if you know them.
I think we do have to be open with limitations when we talk to clinicians about this too. Sometimes it looks like we can reach for the stars and we can't really provide them what they're truly looking for. So I think being transparent about what the technology, as I mentioned before, can do and what it can't do is really important when we are going back to the question when people say no, when we are actually pitching this to folks.
And that's true. And that's what we mentioned before, is that's why we're here. That's why medVR is here, to create a community that we will be a think tank for all these limitations and how to move forward and faster. So yeah, that's very exciting. I think these were all the questions that we've had. I don't know if they're from the audience, if there's any other questions, if you can type them on the Q&A. Otherwise, if any other comments from the panelists, I think we are a little bit over 1 hour.
No, I'm just, but like I said, community is important. I dropped my LinkedIn information in the chat. I'm happy to connect with folks or make connections for you guys if it's valuable. Again, I hate doing this. It's not something I get energy from, but it's important. So so happy to help there.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining. I would again highlight that we want you to be part of VR, medVR journey. We want you to join our organizing team. Go to the website, visit the website, subscribe at medvr.io. Attend our educational series. We also look at the ones that we've had so far, and we have many more to come. We are also on Twitter, on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. We would love you to be either an educator or a mentor, or like Vangelis said, be an active contributor to our team. We are a team that's growing robustly. So we would love to see you. And also remember, our next talk is next Wednesday. It's a very, very interesting talk from experts in the field, who have been in decades in this field, talking about their first deployments of AR and the OR suite to the full integration of AR to the surgical solution. So that's next Wednesday, October 28th at noontime Eastern time. So we would love to see you then. And thank you all again for joining.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Bye now.
See you.